Hey everybody, welcome to lesson 9.2. Inside of this lesson, we're going to be looking at types of errors associated with our hypothesis testing. And this is piggybacking off of our last lesson where we learned how to write the null and alternative hypothesis. So inside of this lesson, we're just going to be naming the errors. And we have two types of errors that occur, a type 1 and a type 2 error. And here they go, or here they are. So if the null hypothesis is true, and first of all, if we do not reject the null hypothesis, that means we've not made an error. So that's the correct outcome. But if we do reject the null hypothesis, look at the data and we conclude that we have enough evidence to reject it. But if that's made an error, that's called a type, and if we do that, that's called a type 1 error. So if we reject a true null hypothesis, type 1 error. The other way is if the null hypothesis is false, which means the alternative hypothesis would be true. And if we do reject the null hypothesis, that would be the correct outcome, and we accept the alternative. But if we do not reject the null hypothesis, we look at the data and we somehow decide not to reject it, that's called the type 2 error. We have probabilities associated with the type 1 and type 2 error with alpha and beta. We want these to be as small as possible because they are errors. So here's an example, the null hypothesis. The victim of an automobile accident is alive when they arrive in the emergency room. So type 1 error, that's when the null hypothesis is true and we reject it. So for this one, the null type 1 error would be the person is alive, but if we reject that, we think they're dead. So the emergency crew thinks the victim is dead when in fact they're alive. Well, terrible mistake. Type 2 error, that's when the null hypothesis is false and we do not reject it. So here, if the null hypothesis is false, so that would be the person is dead, and we don't reject it, so that would mean we don't say they're dead, which means we're not sure what their status is. So that would be a type 2 error. So we don't know if they're alive when in fact they're dead, which in terms of the errors, we could look at these errors, and obviously the type 1 error would be way worse because we would stop giving services to them. And type 2 error, that's a good one to make because maybe there's a small chance that they are alive. Then we give them services. So there we go. We see the probabilities, and the greater consequence here would be the type 1 error. So that's just a way to label our errors. The next chapter, we're going to be looking at data and actually learning how to collect the data to reject or accept this, or reject or not reject this null hypothesis. All right. See ya.